Welcome, shalom and salam. That means peace. It also means a kind of greeting in both Hebrew and Arabic. How can we have peace in the Middle East when there's none at home? That's some of the lyrics, the opening lyrics actually, of Rachel Farrell's 1992 soul track, Peace on Earth. And a good question, because we're all humans, we all share a common ancestry, we're all one people under God, if you believe in God, at least one people on planet Earth. So we do have the kind of responsibility or morality to try to be the best for one another. And the biggest issue we could say right now in the world in terms of conflict is arguably Israel-Palestine, but it's a conflict, as many people know, dating back to the 1940s when there was a UN partition plan that failed, and it led to 75 plus years of conflict between Israel and the Arab states, including the United Nations unrecognized state of Palestine. It's a very difficult topic to talk about without creating enormous polarization, because people are very divided on the topic, and there's a lot of venomosity and animosity towards the other side, depending on who people support. And some people use it as a proxy for their beliefs. If they believe in certain things about politics, certain leftist or rightist causes, or certain religious causes, or whatever, it might polarize them towards one way or another on this kind of issue. But I'm going to try to do the impossible in this video, which is a relatively optimistic outlook on the situation. Firstly, I'll just say that right now it is the 2-year anniversary of October 7th tragic attacks. It's a devastating incident for Israel and the Jewish people, as it was the biggest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. Just like the Holocaust, there are a lot of deniers. And likewise, on the other side, there's people that deny the trauma and suffering going on in Gaza right now. So there are these kind of issues to be recognized. There's no easy answer. After October 7th, 2023, the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, they launched an offensive into Gaza, killing tens of thousands of people, many of them militants. The exact proportion of whom were militants or not, we're not aware of. And that has triggered global reactions, heavy controversy. It's been a PR war for Israel, and it's created protests worldwide. The protests may have contributed towards countries changing their stance on the Israel-Palestine conflict, including Australia right here, as well as France, the United Kingdom, Canada. These countries now have massive Muslim populations that also may have contributed to both the protests and the outcome. Part of these protests have been very good-natured, but there are some darker elements with Hamas and Hezbollah insignia and motifs. In fact, it was only on the 2-year anniversary here in Melbourne that there was pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism, pro-slaughter graffiti all around Melbourne, including in Fitzroy, just in the area, which is shocking. It's good to look at it as being the equivalent of kind of pro-Nazi, ISIS, pro-Al-Qaeda. There are people who are shifting very far radically to the left and very far radically to the right too, and using violent means to get their objective done, which hopefully we can try to condemn that. Hopefully everybody in the world would want peace. That's what you would think, kind of being good-natured people. Especially, I think, artists, we try to tend to think that we can do things and express ourselves in creative forms, and we don't need to return to the primal instinct of hurting and killing others to get our point across. Hopefully that would be the ideal. I believe that's the message of Jesus as well, from a kind of spiritual level, that we can protest and we can demonstrate, we can get our issue and message and point across without needing to hurt or kill anybody, but rather by talking and having sermons, having dialogue, having communication. I believe that if you're creatively inclined, if you are some kind of artist, music artist, painter, filmmaker, then you should have your voice heard by making something. And if you don't have something specifically to say on the matter, then there's plenty of room creating space for others, especially the vision of peace. I will say the caveat that it's hard to just push for peace in the middle of war times because things are not so black and white, when there's hostages involved, when there's people being kept prisoner, when there's an armed struggle going on. In the middle of wartime, peace is not something you can just get like a click of the fingers. So again, I'm not trying to polarize, I'm not trying to tell anybody they're right or wrong. I'm trying to put across a hopeful and positive message, and I'll start by saying factually that most people in Palestine do not support Hamas, at least not anymore. Their support has dropped a lot. Most people do not want them in power. So that is a good news for anybody who's Israeli or a Zionist or wanting the survival of the Jewish people. On the other side, most people in Israel do not support Benjamin Netanyahu. So that is good news for people who are distressed about the chaos in Gaza and in Palestine and want peace. And so hopefully this leads to support for more peaceful options. And in fact, the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research has indicated overall the support for armed struggle fighting against Israel has dropped over time. So again, that's positive news because hopefully that opens the door for peace. And then on the other side, the majority of Israelis, according to Pew Research polls, say that they are committed to long-lasting, sustainable peace with the Palestinians. So that, again, that sounds optimistic. Hopefully people can look at these and take them as a positive. Of course, you can look at many negative things going on. Statistics, photos, videos, polls, especially if you look at the mainstream news and social media, because it tries to divide people, tries to say that these people are evil, these people are evil. We can always look at a brighter side, and of course it might sound completely naive, but there is hope and optimism, such as the idea that 20% of Israel are Palestinian Arabs and have been living in relative peace for the last so many decades. Okay, coexistence is possible. I do also watch Corey Gil-Schuster, and he has a lot of polls that get into the minds and hearts of both Israelis and Palestinians. These can be very negative if you hear what some people have to say. And it is very enlightening because you get to hear people on the ground, but it can be very positive as well. Full disclosure, I have been to Israel over a decade ago. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, fascinating place. I would have loved to have gone to Bethlehem in the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, but I wasn't able to, but hopefully in the future. And I have met people who are both Israelis and Palestinians that hate the other side and want the complete destruction of the other side, but I've also met Israelis and Palestinians that honestly want peace. So it's just like the world we live in. There are always good and bad people. On a positive outlook, I'd like to share some creators of both Palestinian and Israeli background that people may look into for further positive outlooks. I've been watching Nas Daily for about a decade. He's one of the greatest vloggers in the world. He's a Palestinian that lives in Israel, or lived in Israel, and he now travels the world. He makes videos every day. He's incredible, and he does have a message of peace. There's also Anwar Jibawi, who's a Palestinian that lives in the United States, and he's incredibly funny. His videos will have you just chuckling, doing a big belly chuckle. On the Israeli side, Itay Ben David is a music artist that sings in many languages. He's Israeli, but he also sings in Hebrew, English, Arabic, and many other languages. He's a very uniting kind of figure, so definitely check him out if you can. And Yosef Haddad is an Arab Israeli, and he gives a different perspective being in the middle of this whole Palestine-Israeli conflict. Hopefully I've given a bit of a positive or optimistic message, at least, on this incredibly polarizing issue. We can only hope, pray, and believe that the situation will get better, and hopefully if we're doing our best to make our own worlds around us better, especially as creatives, I think if we're doing reflective, hopefully it can only get better, because people need not kill each other and die for no reason. We ought to kind of be putting wars in film and killing and dying in narratives, not in the flesh. God bless you. Inshallah. Shalom. Salam.